Welcome to In This Moment. I'm Janet Stovall, DEI strategist, joined by organizational culture expert Khalil Smith. We tackle the urgent questions in management and inclusion, exploring what's next and what you can do about it today. We're so glad you're here with us. Let's dive in. Today, we're talking with Tom Moore. He's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress and focusing on democracy and government reform. From 2015 to 2023, Tom served as counsel and then chief of staff to Federal Election Commissioner Ellen Weintraub. He advised on policy, litigation, enforcement, and agency management. Tom and Weintraub devised a legal strategy that broke a decades-long FEC enforcement deadlock. The New York Times actually covered their breakthrough approach.
Tom's background spans political reporting for Congressional Quarterly and CNN, federal appellate clerk, Latham Watkins litigator, and two-term Rockville City Council member. Right now, he's watching unprecedented government pressure meet business reality, and every organization has to choose how to respond. Welcome to In This Moment, Tom Moore.
So, Tom, over the next 24 months, what specific pressure tactics should organizations expect?
It's going to be hard to say exactly what to expect, but they can expect more and not less. The administration has had quite a bit of success in applying pressure tactics and having people respond to them in the way they wanted. And there's been less resistance than I think a lot of people would have hoped. So that's just going to be encouraging them. But I think they could expect it on any front that they could possibly be expected to face the federal government on, whether it's contracting or legal challenges to their personnel policies, just the whole range, really.
So this is sort of like if you give a bully something, they come back for it. Is that what we mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
And that has been the biggest problem so far is that the bully's just walking around taking people's lunch money and nobody's standing up to them.
Okay.
And Tom, you mentioned federal in the first part of your answer. I'm curious, how much are you, and should we be anticipating this at kind of the local, state level? How much of this is kind of exclusively federal, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, I mean, the chaotic energy is coming from the federal government, from the White House, but there's been a surprising amount of capitulation at the state level as well. This redistricting thing that has come up during the summer is a good example of that, where the president said, I want 5 more districts out of Texas, and the Texas governor just said, yep, let's do it. And the legislature said, yep, we'll do it. That's putting a tremendous amount of pressure on our system from the federal and state levels because states are kind of rolling over and doing what the president wants. But you know, the energy for that is coming from the federal level.
To that point, I've heard people talking about the fact that with the way the states respond to federal pressure, even though we have states have rights to do things, that what we're setting up is almost blue and red parts of the country. We know that from a voting standpoint, but it's also going to be, seems like from a legislative standpoint. So if he goes to Texas and Texas turns over, then he goes somewhere else where, I won't say he, I'll say the administration. They go somewhere else and that state turns over. What happens then when we've got it like all state here, state there? What kind of chaos does that create?
Well, I mean, it's again, to go back to the redistricting thing, it was interesting, the Texas Democratic legislators fled to Illinois, where it's a blue state, and the governor there said, you're safe here. We're not going to let anybody drag you out of the state. But, if they'd gone to Oklahoma, where they tried to, where they went after another attempt to break quorum a couple of years ago, it's not clear what would have happened. There's no legal authority for Texas to come get them, but maybe the Republican Oklahoma government would allow that this time. It's a whole new ballgame.
I mean, this is crazy. Has there ever been a time, and I know that's not a fair question because that's a history question, but to me, it just seems absolutely bonkers that what we have is, representatives literally leaving and running to another state to hold off a vote. This seems like madness to me. And is that going to escalate? I mean, what does the escalation look like? And what does it look like if you happen to choose either as an organization or as a state to resist versus if you decide to comply for it?
I mean, it depends. I don't think Trump would have asked Texas to do it if he didn't think there was going to be a yes. So that's part of it, that, it's kind of, there's preemptive compliance among a lot of folks who are, don't like any of these policies. And there's a lot of preemptive, we know you're going to agree to it from people who do. But it's interesting that things like breaking quorum and that kind of thing to stop something from happening is nothing new. Hearing this week about, Abraham Lincoln jumped out a window out of the Illinois State House to avoid to break quorum on a matter that he didn't want to vote on.
Well, I guess we're better off.
So that kind of thing happens.
Not that bad yet, Tom? Nobody's jumping out of windows or...
Not saying that. I think it was a first floor window. It was, it's hard to say that all of this is unprecedented. I mean, you look at the kind of the Reconstruction era and the post-Reconstruction era, just how ugly that was and just how lawless that was in a lot of different ways. But we are, in terms of the modern American history, we are in absolutely uncharted waters.
So, Tom, out of curiosity, are you seeing certain industries that are more vulnerable to some of this thrash and some of the uncertainty?
Well, we've seen a couple. Law firms, some have fallen, some have resisted. Universities, some have fallen, some have resisted. But what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks that is especially disturbing is just kind of regular business. NVIDIA and AMD agreed to pay 15% of their Chinese sales to the government without any law being behind that at all. It's probably unconstitutional, but they rolled over and agreed to it. You know, they are fighting war on all fronts and just attacking every segment of the economy they can.
And I know we're in in this discussion right now, our discussion is sort of the what's next for this. But what's next if they can do this now? This is what's happening now. What does this look like 24 months from now? I mean, are there legal challenges? And if they challenge it, is it weaponized? I mean, what is it 24 months?
Well, it depends. There are court challenges and some of those are working. Some of them are slowing things down. There's an unprecedented number of temporary restraining orders and that kind of thing being applied against the government to stop them from doing a lot of this really crazy stuff they're trying. But I think the biggest determinant of what happens 24 months from now is what happens in the midterm elections. If there's still unified control of government, if Democrats have no ability to hold hearings or do investigations or subpoena people or anything like that, we could be in for a rough ride until the end of the Trump administration.
Well, I guess my concern is that even if things change over, the Supreme Court seems very much willing to give this administration what it wants. So what does that mean 24 months from now? Because the legal challenges, they're dragging along, but if the Supreme Court gets involved, everything seems to go to the Supreme Court now. I don't recall that always happening as much. And they seem to agree. Even if the Democrats were able to win, if we don't gerrymander things enough so that the Democrats can actually win, what does that mean if the Supreme Court's saying yes to everything?
Yeah, no, it's a real concern. If Democrats don't take back the House, courts can apply the brakes between now and the midterm elections and kind of slow things down and prevent entire departments from being dismantled, and the worst of the excesses can be slowed down until these elections. But if there's no change in control, then the courts will really not be enough to stop things. And yeah, you're exactly right. The Supreme Court has granted the executive branch an unprecedented amount of authority. It's the weirdest thing to me. I mean, it's kind of like if we're coming up on our 250th birthday as a country, and it's like if there's one thing that was clear that every one of us learned as school children, it was that the founding fathers and the Revolutionary era folks did not want a king, and we are kind of headed toward getting one. Despite the fact that one of the arguments I've seen for this is they're trying to do the originalist interpretation of things. Originally, that's not what they wanted. So, I'm kind of looking at that one going, yeah, right, that's not it. But that's a good point. This is what we get for a birthday present. Yeah. Great. A king. Great. Exactly. Happy birthday. Yeah, it's scary.
So, Tom, one of the things that, we've been focused on a lot as Janet and I have had conversations is around, so what does all of this mean? Obviously, you were talking about what's next. A large part of kind of what's now, and also what should organizations be doing now? So what do you recommend to companies that are trying to figure out where do we go from here? What are the things we should be doing today to prepare ourselves mentally, financially, emotionally, in terms of workforce or any of those other things? Because a lot of our listeners are like, okay, I get it. What can I do from my seat?
Yeah, there's a couple different levels of that. Organizations, companies can preemptively organize themselves, and say like, all right, if one of us gets attacked, all of us will respond. I think the problem with law firms is that the president was picking them off one by one, and there wasn't any kind of unified response. I think when they attacked Columbia University, people were surprised by that and took everyone by surprise. But then the higher education community did kind of coalesce and say like, all right, we will respond together. So I think not waiting until your segment of the economy is attacked, until the things that you sell are, under the administration's focus. Make sure that you are organized with other folks to have a collective response to whatever happens next.
But how do you do that? Okay, because let's say you're the one who holds their hands up, say, you know what, let's get together, let's figure this out. What happens then? The target gets on your back. So how do How do you make how do you make yourself the one who sticks their head up first without it getting cut off?
Well, I mean, this is what, a lot of organizations are part of larger industry groups that represent their interests. It's the American Petroleum Association for, gas and oil and gas guys. But, there's thousands of groups like that do have membership of a bunch of companies in that sector. Those are the groups that should be organizing this. That is their job. If your sector of the economy is under attack because of higher taxes, or some regulation you don't like, or the inclusive employment practices of your segment is under legal attack by the government, those are the groups that should be standing up and fighting for every company in that group. So that's one group. That means that no particular company needs to stick up and put their heads above everybody else's and make noise. They just need to go to their organizing group and say, like, hey, if this happens, we need to make sure that you're on the ball with this.
And Tom, how do you account for the fact that some of these organizations are saying, actually, the best thing we should do is just keep our head down, hope that nothing turns in our direction? Is your point of view on the calculus here a little bit more of it's either pay and fight and stand your ground now, or you're going to be in a really bad position later? Or is there a world in which, and I think I know your answer, where you would ever say, you know what, it's all right, just keep your head down, hope that this doesn't come, blow past your door, and everything will settle itself out?
Yeah. Certainly there's a certain amount of that the system can tolerate, but if everybody does that, we end up in fascism. The law firms that thought they were going to slide right through the Third Reich did not end well for them. The banks that thought they could make money off of Germany's military adventures in the 1930s didn't work out well for them. And that is the most extreme comparison you can make, but it's the reason we don't forget the horrors of World War II and the horrors of Nazism is because we don't want to repeat them. And what we're seeing is the first major steps, real, not tippy-toe steps, but real steps toward that in the United States. And no, you can't just capitulate. You can't just turn a blind eye and hope that they're going to come for everybody else and not come for you. I mean, we've all read the poem. So it's, we have to fight.
You mentioned, you and I were trading texts and emails back yesterday, and you mentioned Kamala Harris did a interview. I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but you thought that would be that. You mentioned what she said. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the main point I got out of that, she's been fully justified in all the warnings she threw out during the 2024 campaign. It's actually been worse than a lot of people thought. What she said was she thought that those warnings were accurate, but that even if this stuff did come to pass, that our system would be strong enough to handle it. And she still hopes that it is. But what she's been surprised by, and just I think profoundly disappointed by, is the capitulation by all these different groups across American society. That there hasn't been the strength of character and sense of history for folks in power in a position to do something about it, to say, no, like, this is not okay. We will plant our flag here, and this is a red line. You cannot cross it, and we will fight to the death on this. And she's right. It's been a shocking amount of capitulation to grossly illegal tactics that the government is applying to all kinds of industries.
Okay, now I'm going to throw the question out there that makes this. I'm sorry, Cleo.
No, go.
I'm going to put this question out here, which is what makes this podcast what it is. What in the world has happened that we have this kind of capitulation? I mean, I always say that when I was born, I wasn't a citizen because I was born the year before the Voting Rights Act was passed. So technically, I mean, I wasn't voting at a year old, but if I could have, I wouldn't have been able to. So, but then you had people who got in the streets, who fought back. What has happened now that we don't have this? Why is this capitulation happening now?
I think it's a general thought that it's never been bad in this country. We've had 250 years of uneven, but uneven democracy in this country, and that's never going to change. And I can just ignore this, or make a few bucks from it, or just just turn a blind eye to that happening over there, and we'll get through it. And I think, and it's kind of a human response, and you can kind of see why people did it in Germany in the 30s too, where it's like fighting this could get me killed, so maybe we'll just ride it out. But when everybody does that, you end up at the worst possible place.
But we had that. We had a civil war. We had a civil rights movement. We had a women's rights movement. So there have been times when that collective defense happened. And I guess where, when I think about in this moment right now, what I hope is that's building. I hope that what's happening right now, people are going, okay, you know what? We didn't think this would happen, but it looks like it's happening. But we're not going to let it happen because, I guess that's what my fear is that I don't see that collective defense happening. And
Yeah.
I know that I want to do something. And I'm sitting right here. I think I get the feel that a lot of people feel like, what can one person do? So I guess that's it. When you talk about the collective defense, what can one person do? Can one person do anything?
Oh, absolutely. A variety of ways. One thing to kind of get back to your, how America responds to this, I'm going to mangle the quote, but Winston Churchill said something along the lines of, you can always count on America to do the right thing at the very last minute. And it was true. Like in World War II, we ignored horrible things happening for years. FDR wanted to get into the war much earlier. He couldn't get Congress to go for it. And it wasn't until the war was brought to our doorstep at Pearl Harbor that we jumped in on all fronts. Civil rights were terrible in this country before, and not getting any better for a century before we decided. I think the Black folks in this country were always pretty cognizant of that. And it took a good solid century for the white folks in this country to actually stand up and decide that they wanted to do something about it too.
And the advent of television.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Bringing visuals into people's homes and that kind of thing, that was very powerful. But it's like, we have never jumped headlong. Like, you look at what we're doing with the climate crisis. It's like we are ignoring it till the last possible second. And I think America's may well ignore the threat of fascism until the last possible second. And that's when people have tried that in the past, it's gone very poorly.
So, Tom, one of the things that we've been talking about a little bit is kind of, what is legal, what is not. And to your point, there's some kind of, proactive capitulation that is happening. But what legal education do organizations need immediately? What should folks be thinking about to better understand? Is this something that has already been passed through the courts and therefore we need to figure out how do we navigate it versus actually this isn't truly a thing? People are kind of using shadows and innuendo and some of that to nudge folks in a direction that may not even be the law, even if it's going to.
Yeah, in some ways, I've heard this described, the administration's approach to all this is described as the what are you going to do about it administration. And so it's, they cut off funding for X, Y, and Z. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And I think part of it is challenge everything. They threatened to cut off funds to Harvard. Harvard went to court and got a temporary restraining order by noon that day after they filed at 9 a.m. You can't take any of it lying down because they will come back for more. There's going to be tension in the C-suite between chief legal officers and chief executive officers. And chief legal officers are going to say, well, this could, fighting this could really be harmful to us. And, there's a possibility that we could have to shut down because it would go so poorly for us. And a CEO needs to take a broader view and say, it could go if we don't fight this, if this doesn't get fought, it could go very poorly for all of us, not just at this company, but in every corner of the country. So there's legal departments are risk averse, and they will almost always present the option that will get the company, the organization, in the least amount of legal hot water. But somebody along the way needs to have a broader view that says, no, we will all lose everything if we don't fight this.
I think a term that we used when we were getting ready for this was something called anticipatory obedience. Was what kind of brought it together. So if an organization, let's say the CEO, is that person that says, we as an individual organization are going to do this. But let's say that CEO also looks at it and says, takes your advice, which is, all right, we need to have a collective response to this. Does the CEO then go to those organizations that you're talking about? And can we assume that there's some organization like that in every industry? Okay, so in higher education, who would have been that organization that Columbia could have gone to if they'd chosen not to fold? Who would they go to?
Oh, there's a bunch. There are a bunch of higher education associations. I think ACE is one of them. I think I might be conflating like elementary, primary education versus higher education. But there are all kinds of industry groups. And it's Washington, D.C. has streets full of them. These are the groups that lobby for their industry's interests day in and day out. But like higher ed has plenty of them. They absolutely could have used those groups. But I think what it is, you have to individual leaders of individual organizations have to make it clear to their collective groups that this is what they want, that they want a red line drawn, and they will back anybody who gets challenged, and not let this pass.
And Tom, what do you suggest for the employees of an organization? Is it any different? Because we're talking about kind of the leaders and the C-suite and some of those folks that are in a position to make some of those decisions. When you think about that lower down into the organization, is the advice any different? And if so, how?
Well, I mean, two things. One is this idea of anticipatory obedience. That is, you don't want to do it on the organizational level. You don't want to do it on the personal level. We should be going about our lives as if we have a rule of law and a constitution and rules and regulations and things that the government can and can't do. If we just assume that, if individual employees assume that the government can just, the president, the government, whatever, can just come in and shut down your organization because he doesn't like the way you guys hire people, then you've lost half the battle already. If your organization starts to fold, but something individual employees can do is say, like, no, wait a minute, you want to get rid of the DEI stuff we've got here. Is it illegal? Are we doing this because it's a legal move, or are we doing this because we're trying to protect ourselves? Just ask those questions up the line. And then in their personal lives, there's some research that says that when authoritarian movements threaten societies, if you can mobilize just 3.5% of the population, get them out there, get them in a protest, get them do a general strike. There's a variety of things that a relatively small number of people can do. If you can mobilize that number of people in your society, that is how authoritarian regimes fail. That's how the people beat them. You don't need 85% of America to stand up and go do something. It's a much smaller number, based on the way it's gone to other places of the world. So that is absolutely something that individuals can do.
3.5% sounds doable.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah,
number.
Exactly.
That's wow. No, that's really insightful. I mean, I think that I'm sitting here listening to this now, and I'm thinking 3.5%. If that's what it takes, then I think that's doable, because I do think the feeling is I can't do anything. And even the folks who want to speak up, people are afraid to lose their jobs. And so, I think individuals are afraid to push back. Thanks so much for saying that, because I think if I can't do it at work, maybe I could do it outside of work if I'm talking about trying to be part of the 3.5%.
Yeah, and actually, it's not the reason I brought it up, but not to tout CAP's products, but the Center for American Progress just did a report on this. There's some, it's on our website, and I'll get you guys the link.
We'll
for
get
that.
it as
a
resource.
It's pretty powerful. Yeah, it's a great resource.
And what does it say?
It lays out this 3.5%.
Okay.
That is what it takes. It's in an engaging and approachable way.
Okay, I love that. Well, Tom, that's you've made me feel better today. I hope everybody listening feels better today.
If that's all you did, Tom, the world thanks you.
Yes, really, because I hope that through this podcast we'll be able to give people hope. I'm hoping that's what we do. And you had a big one. Yours is a big one when we talk about it. Probably yours is the biggest area where people feel the most unable to do anything. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. And it's these are dark times, but yeah, we have gotten through dark times before, sometimes at the last possible moment. But I think our democracy is strong enough. It's been around long enough that we will weather this. But people have to step up. If we don't, then we won't.
I think we can end on that.
All right.
I was going to give you is there one thing you want to leave us with? But I thought I didn't give you that question. So I think we can end on that. They can just fade after that. I think it'd be great.
Exactly.
Khalil, was there anything that, of course, I'm usually, as usual, interrupting and going off script, but was there anything that you thought to add, you wanted to ask that you didn't?
No, not at all. Listen, I'm usually the one going off script, usually the one creating the script. So, and then I take it in all sorts of different directions. No, I think it was a brilliant conversation, Tom. I appreciate all of the insights. I think there are a lot of quotable parts of this that folks can take away. I think it, is pithy. Well, Janet, clearly you and I both felt like that was an amazing conversation with Tom, and super excited for all of our listeners to be able to dig in and pull some things away. But we wanted to talk about the 3 key takeaways that we kind of, resonated with us. The first around building collective defense, this idea that isolated organizations are vulnerable organizations, and you can build coalitions before you become a target, not after the pressure starts.
And I think the other thing that I heard from this was you have to really think about what the true costs are, calculate the true costs. I love the term anticipatory obedience, and that always feels safe. It always did. but you always end up paying for it. It always costs more on the other end. So what we need are frameworks to make strategic decisions. And we actually have an episode on that. But we have to know when to resist, when to adapt. It's about thinking long-term and not short-term.
Absolutely. And then the other one that I don't think we could get out of our three key takeaways and not talk about is it's only 3.5%.
3.5%.
I think that was an insight for both of us, right? Just this notion that 3.5% can create the movement, sustain the movement, and continue to move things forward. So that one absolutely jumped out at both of us, I know.
I agree, because I might not be able to get 80%, but I can damn sure pull together 3.5.
Janet, I think you could also get 80%, but for the rest of us, 3.5 feels far more doable.
Well then, Cleo, I am looking forward to the next one, and we'll see you all on the next episode. Thanks for joining us on In This Moment. Find today's resources at inthismoment.network and connect with us on LinkedIn. And if this was valuable, subscribe and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. It helps other leaders find us. Stay ready for what's next.